needs is dying on a cross for a rotten hooker.
I thought I was a good Christian.
I go to church every Sunday.
I thought I was a good Christian.
I go to church every Sunday. I am a very religious person.
I thought I was a good Christian.
The very line the serpent told to Eve in the Garden of Eden. Garden of Eden. Garden of Eden. The gospel of Jesus Christ. Spreads confusion and promotes lies. The gospel of Jesus Christ. Spreads confusion and promotes lies. The gospel of Jesus Christ. Spreads confusion and promotes lies. The gospel of Jesus Christ. Spreads confusion and
Hey everybody, it is January 12th, 2014. Believe it or not, we are now several years past the the end days. You may have missed out on us for a while, but we are back, and so we can kick it off. I'm your host, Ken. With me up in the Bay Area, we have Jason.
Hello, how are you?
And all the way back in the place where this all started, Hampton Roads area, we have Matty Brake.
And he's
Hey.
currently in a Starbucks, so that background noise that you will hear will be coming from Starbucks.
Oh, Starbucks.
And I'm no longer in Hampton Roads. I'm joining
Oh,
you
right,
from
you're
Mount Airy, Maryland.
Oh, Maryland. I must have missed when you went up there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, regardless, East Coast, about 3,000 miles away, because of the wonders of technology, and not divine intervention. Although that would be equally amazing, I think. So we have so much stuff to cover. We have all sorts of amazing church-state issues. We have the battle between contraceptives and religious freedom. We have the some interesting topics on religious persecution, and of course, if anyone remembers the Satanic Panic, it seems like it's still alive and kicking. So, was there anything any of you guys wanted to talk about first and kick this off?
Yeah, Jason, if you want to, when you edit this, put up a picture. We're putting out a missing persons report for one Robert Price. Robert Cornelius Price, originally of Maryland, then Virginia, also the owner of the dog formerly known as Narrow Video Dog. Bob seems to have gone missing. If you have any information about his whereabouts, please tell him to call any of us.
I do have a couple of leads. As you can see, that I have traveled far and wide. I am now sitting in the gates of hell. And I have a lead that he is stuck somewhere in Skyrim. So if anybody's in Skyrim and you find Bob, please tell him to come back home. We need him.
Until then, I'm going to do my best Bob imitation. Well, here's the thing. It's funny you say that.
That's a passable Bob impression. I can't see you, so I'm assuming that the beard isn't quite as luxurious, and you're not really leaning into it the way he does. But I'll use my imagination.
You have to shake the finger and the eyes go wide.
Yeah.
All right, so it's so awesome.
But I'm sure he's enjoying himself in the land of Skyrim right now, doing whatever you do in Skyrim. Okay, so there's a few things that I want to talk about really quick. We passed through the wonderful time known as the War on Christmas, and it's one of my favorite times of the year because I love war and I love religious strife, and I love all those things. I don't actually love any of those things, but what I do love is when you take obnoxious religious conservative lawmakers and you back them into a corner. And that's exactly what several groups have done, most notably in Oklahoma, where upon approving a giant statue of the Ten Commandments on public space, the Church of Satan promptly offered their own religious symbol, which is a giant statue of Satan seated on a throne with two children next to him, and it's probably the most metal thing I've ever seen in my entire life. It's an interesting concept because these religious conservatives that wanted to put the Ten Commandments on public property, use taxpayer funds to essentially support this initiative, is now they have to either A, say, oh yes, it's a public space, freedom of religion reigns, and all religions can be accepted here. You just need to front the money and the ability to put the statue or whatever it is here, or they have to say no, and then take a horrible lawsuit on siding with a single religion. And Matt, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic.
I did have a couple. I think initially, and I think you guys have heard my stance before, that, and I just actually wrote a blog, shameless plug, about the issue of like religion in the sacred and secular spaces. And in the blog, I basically said that one of the things I noticed, like walking around George Mason before the holiday, was that there weren't really any decorations around, and so the space felt really sterile. And so I think I get overall disturbed at the idea of kind of this like sterile secular space with no like artistic expression, reflecting a good chunk of the population's celebration in terms of whatever, religious holidays happening, whether it be Hanukkah or Christmas or Yuletide or Festivus. And so, like I said before, when they did that, they had that one Hindu clergy do the prayer at Congress one time, and someone spoke up and said, "We are Christians and patriots." My comment was that in a pluralistic society, I think maybe each one should be represented and be given the opportunity to maybe give the congressional prayer or something, because religion is a part of, this is kind of Durkheimian, like it's a part of society's institutions for the most part. Like there's some sort of element of the sacred and the profane in most societies, and I don't like secularization's totally ignoring of like that cultural heritage, which I understand can be espoused in private, but it seems like there should be some secular recognition of like the cultural past. And so, all that being said, with the Church of Satan, here was my only issue with it, is that like in theory what I said should apply to them too, and it very well could. I think my reservation would just be that with the Church of Satan, their ideals are like those of greed and selfishness and a couple other things. So it's not quite, there's no Kantian categorical imperative to their beliefs. It's like, it's totally about selfishness and greed. And
well, to be fair, it's just Ayn Rand in a cloak. Which and it is. It's ethical egoist, narcissistic, self-centered concept of self-gratification, which really is just Ayn Rand's objectivism carried into whatever nth degree, and then you drape it in a black cloak and light some candelabras and say funny words.
Dude, that could be an entire blog on Ayn Rand, the Church of Satan, and libertarianism, right?
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is I think when you talk about, especially modern American politics, I think the Church of Satan's ideals go better hand in hand with it than sort of traditional Christian social mores. But that's definitely how things change. I'm not opposed to the idea that religious imagery can be displayed in public spaces. I think it is a part of society. It is. I would fight on the fact that I think a secular society doesn't have to be sterile, because there are obviously amazingly beautiful pieces of art and music and
Yes.
whatever theater that are secular, but the only roadblock that it comes into when you start saying, okay, well, let's allow religious iconography and symbolism to permeate this secular area is you then have to be fair. And you
Yeah.
can't discriminate on message and be like, well, sorry, Church of Satan, there's only 15 Satanists in Oklahoma. Therefore, you don't get a space. Because then you
Yeah.
just have a tyranny of the masses where you have the majority dictating what can and can't be displayed without any, without any regard to whether or not something is actually profanity or not, or it's actually
Matt, mute yourself, please.
What's that?
Mute yourself. You're drowning out Ken with that
Okay.
background noise.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So
Did that do it?
that's my one real issue with it is you get this just mess. And so long as people are fine with the mess, I'm fine with that. But you have to be able to recognize everything equally, which I think more and more over the last few years, several government institutions have been able to do by allowing, the Festivus poll that was put up in Florida, and of course, mainstream holidays have been better recognized, but we still have some hurdles to cover.
Yeah, because then of course there's always Scientology.
Which is a big thing here in LA.
Yeah. So like Church of Satan and Scientology, I almost feel like those are so qualitatively different than even something like Buddhism.
Yeah.
Because it's not exactly like with Scientology, obviously you have the problem of like the abusive nature of the entire establishment. And then with, again, Church of Satan, you have this this idealization, this veneration of the most selfish aspects of the human psyche. So
Yeah.
But,
But I mean, you could even say, that selfish aspect of the human psyche. I as reprehensible as I find it, and like I've had like over the years, I've known a number of people who identified as Satanists, and I'm putting heavy air quotes on that. And I'm always like, really, like it's such a self-centered, narcissistic, egocentric, like nonsense philosophy. It's just it's hey, be greedy and be a dick. Like that's what it means, and it is so categorically different from many other religions. Like say Buddhism, for example, which is its teachings are almost the exact opposite, or Jainism, or or if you go back to kind of more old school Old Testament thought on how to deal with the poor and whatnot. But
we talk about in Coalesce.
Yeah, and you should, because I think it's an important part of the whole Abrahamic religion thing that gets overlooked a lot, especially in modern society. So, yeah, I mean that's my thought on that. But that I think that carries over to the next topic I want to talk about, which is this whole battle about contraceptives and religious freedom. Should an organization that is founded on religious principles be required by the government to provide access to health care, such as contraceptives? And I think yes, and I'll qualify this after you have at it.
Well, contraceptives, I don't have any problem with contraceptives as long as they're not abortive in nature. So if you're going to require someone to provide abortion services, then I would be against that, or the RU 486 pill. If we're talking about morning after or other forms of like the morning after emergency stuff or condoms or birth control stuff, then I've never had a problem with. So I know within
Because Matty
Catholicism,
Break likes to get his freak on, and sometimes he, you know, he needs a little extra materials to get it going. Is that what you're saying?
I feel like it might be best to just keep talking. So,
Okay. Okay, continue. This is, I mean, this. To be fair, this is generally where I pegged that you would say, like, having known you for a while, this is you're. It sounds like
I'm so
you're right
predictable.
where I thought you would be.
Well, I just
so
want to
predictable.
point out that we're forcing Matt in a public space to talk about the Church of Satan and contraception. So he's got all these people sitting around him. He's like, yeah, I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah, Starbucks sounds a lot quieter right now.
At one point, it did sound like everyone had died down and stopped talking. And it's worse because I feel like I have an in-ear monitor, so I have no idea what's happening around me. I'm sure I'm talking louder than I need to. Yeah, no, that's my biggest thing is I think when you ask someone, and I've said, I think I can't remember where I had it was on. I mean, in fact, Ken, you might have been a part of this random Facebook conversation with that was at like 3 a.m. and someone was wrong, so we had to have a conversation about it.
Someone's wrong on the internet. You drop everything and get on your keyboard.
Dude, that's why iPhones were invented, man.
I know, but my autocorrect pisses me off so much.
Oh yeah.
God.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing with like the Hobby Lobby thing and some of these other situations where like a person's work is a part of who they are when they found something, when they do something. And so when they start a business or do a nonprofit or something like that, I don't think anyone should be forced to, within reason, violate their conscience by beginning some new enterprise. In terms of the birth control stuff, for Catholic organizations, again, I'm not Catholic. I'm okay with birth control, so I'd still be sympathetic to their cause. In terms of for me, it comes down to the abortive. It comes down to the abortion thing, like abortion or abortive practices or medications or whatever like that. Again, RU-486 is the only one I really know offhand. I would have a real problem with something like that being required, because on the anti-abortion, pro-life side, it really is a deeply held theological idea about what it means to be human when life begins, and the idea of the human soul, and I'm not comfortable with it.
I want to jump in just real quick because I think we need to define what required means in terms of this conversation, because it's not mandatory, it's not pushed upon the individuals as a mass. I mean, it's there if you choose, if you believe in that mechanism, whatever it may be that you're to choose to use it or not. And then I also want to bring up the part of the conversation that when you start a business, or as an individual, or as a Christian, or somebody with strong convictions, to not pay for or not support something that goes against your core values. But so the question I have is to these people who are not wanting to provide health care coverage to their employees because there's one element within it that they don't agree with because it may lead to abortions, are they still paying taxes? Because we pay for things all the time that we don't agree with, such as war, such as weapons of mass destruction, such as all of these things that go against the fundamental values of what I believe would be a Christian value. And for someone of my stature, I don't want to support killing machines.
Yeah,
that's a fair point.
My issue with the concept of contraceptives and even abortive methods, it is what Jason said. These, no one's putting a gun to, the company's head, and they're like, listen, every single female employee you have has to have an abortion right now. It's just providing the services should they need them. And it gets very dangerous once we start allowing companies to opt in or out of certain parts of legislation when it comes to providing healthcare services. And if we allow the Catholics to not provide access to contraceptives, and a Lutheran organization to not provide access to morning after pills or whatever it is, then we have to stop and think, is this opening the door for Christian Scientists to opt out of providing healthcare entirely? Like, you can't see a doctor. A Jainist organization, can they opt out of providing medical treatment to anything that stemmed from eating meat? It creates a weird slope that it's very easy to see it going down into that, because once you set a precedent for something, as much as I hate the slippery slope fallacy, in politics, the slope exists, and it's called a precedent. And once a precedent is set, that is the guiding force that points to every other case that will emulate that from that point on. So any sort of religious institution. So we do need to sort of figure out how broadly we define or separate the convictions of a founder of an organization and what the organization is socially entitled to provide to its employees.
That I agree with. I think the one issue, I get what you said about no one's putting a gun to anyone's head and saying you have to get an abortion. But the issue becomes one of, in this, I think to put someone in a position where they would have to cover it if someone did choose that is still like one thing a lot of Christians don't like doing is, how do I want to put this? They don't want to condone. So by being forced to give that coverage, they're being forced to condone something that they would normally not give any of their resources to. Now, I take what you're saying about the slippery slope argument. But in the previously existing system, I think our culture was very aware of the cultural divide on anti-abortion, pro-abortion, pro-life, pro-choice sides. Like, it's a pretty even split statistically on who supports what. So it shouldn't come as a surprise, as if this is some tiny little nuanced sect that's like, no abortion, when it's a much wider swath of the population that it seems like, I don't say bullying, but it seems maybe a bit of a strong arm tactic. You know what I mean? Like, to be like, well, I mean, we can't just, give in to every, flying spaghetti monster belief or idea, just because, because if we do this thing for abortion with evangelicals and Catholics, we'll have to do all this other stuff. Like, it seems like on the issue of abortion, like, you're dealing with something that someone considers to be life or death. Like, so it's not going to be, I feel like it's a bit of a equivocation to relate it to some of the other things.
Mm-hmm. I mean, even talking about that, you don't even need to go to the sort of fringe denominations. When I bring up Christian Scientists, I mean, they don't believe in medical practice at all. Like, they blood transfusions are out. Jehovah's Witnesses, blood transfusions are out. Anything like that. So I mean, and it's very serious. I mean, it's deeply rooted in their theology, in their view of the healing power of God, or even if you were to get a blood transfusion and you're a Jehovah's Witness, like you're faced with a soteriological problem now, because it's taking blood into you is a direct violation of the Noahide creed. Like, because blood is so sacred. It's the life force essentially, and I think that they could make the same argument that they wouldn't want to condone that, which they consider to be so profane.
But there is a precedent for there is a precedent set, isn't there, where like if one of their kids needs some type of medical treatment, like they can't keep their kid from getting that treatment. Like, haven't there been precedents set?
Yeah, for parents now, and that's relatively recent, and only in a couple states. Oregon, I believe, is one where if a child dies because of a preventable disease, and the reason they die is because the parents opted to not take them to a doctor, that is a punishable offense. I believe you face a manslaughter charge. I think that precedent is a little different than saying, oh yeah, no, you can go to the doctor. We're just not going to pay for it with our funds, despite the fact that we're required by law to provide you with health insurance.
Health insurance, yes, but if the health insurance
covers doctors.
Doctors, yes.
Doctors.
If it covers
scientists.
Yes, that. Going back to the issue of the abortion, though, if it covers abortive services, at that point, I was going to say something. Dag nabbit.
To carry over to one more point that I wanted to make is, as Christians specifically, wouldn't you kind of see this as a render unto Caesar sort of deal? Because I mean, even when the idea of rendering unto Caesar is like, yeah, the Romans did shit that the early Christians hated, and the Jews hated, like they couldn't stand it, but Jesus still instructed them to pay their taxes, which means they were supporting the construction of new temples to Jupiter, or in the case of the Jews, the sacrificing of pigs, or Nero's crazy orgies, or Caligula's crazy orgies, which we covered in previous things. Probably not actually happening. The election of a horse to the Senate. Things that early Christians would have found incredibly objectionable, but they kind of got over it. And I know this is kind of one of your very strongly your attitude towards something is you want that sort of like Christian element to take a step back away from politics, because you see this is not the kingdom.
I think going back to what I remember what I was going to say now, in terms of the precedent, and I will get to what you just said. In terms of the precedent, up until this point, there's been no precedent for forcing someone that I know of. I could be wrong. Like, there's a precedent for giving the person the choice to pay for an abortion. There hasn't been a precedent of saying, out of your company funds, you need to fund someone's abortion if they want it. And so that would always be my fear with the contraceptive argument. Other than that, like, the contraceptive argument doesn't bother me because I'm for non-abortive contraceptives. Regarding the Caesar to Caesar issue, that's why I didn't necessarily care a lot about the healthcare law getting passed when I knew people who were freaking out. Because I saw it mostly as that, in terms of the abortion part, I feel like this was easier in Rome, because whenever the Romans would put their children that they didn't want on like that outside steps, the Christians would come and collect them. So it's a little bit harder in the case of abortion. We can't necessarily do that. So I'm not quite sure because of the way modern abortion is done. I'm not quite sure if it might be, if anything we were to say about it would be anachronistic, considering the date that the text was written and then our modern issues. I still wrestle with
Are,
the
are you
tension.
saying that that a piece of scripture doesn't apply to the modern time because it's anachronistic?
I'm saying that I still think
Yeah.
I still think there are principles, but I think as with, and this is why I hold to a bit more of a Wesleyan quadrilateral situation, because there's a place for the tradition and reason and experience and scripture to come together to answer some of the questions that aren't answered specifically in the text. That being said, within scripture I see two elements. One is giving unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and the other is to stand up for the poor and the oppressed. And so right now I try to figure out that tension, what it means to realize this is not the kingdom, but at the same time to support orgs like International Justice Mission and help the oppressed, while at the same time not trying to be like, the kingdom's here, woo!
Yeah.
So in the case of abortion, I want to say it's anachronistic because in terms of dealing with like the taxes, abortion, not being able to rescue kids from the doorsteps thing, like I don't think there's a solid answer given in scripture other than just to simply say like I still think humans are made in the image of God, and yet we pay taxes to Caesar, and so whatever solution a Christian would come up with would have to live in that tension. Maybe that means nonviolent resistance of some kind, of saying like, no, we think this is an issue of justice, and so maybe we'll do something and get arrested at a parade or something. You know, who knows?
Very nice. Well played. Well played. Well played. All right. My only real concern with it is I do feel that slippery slope, and I get what you're saying, you know, and I do understand the tension of working within a paradigm which is, you know, a worldview that covers everything. You know, because I work in a situation like that where, you know, I work for an organization that is set on a series of principles that I wholeheartedly agree with, and it would be very difficult to compromise those. So I have the sympathy for the issue. I just feel like on the grand scheme of things, human health and access to it is such a universal human right that it becomes very difficult to try and pick and choose what certain groups can grant access to and not. And the other thing is, we're not asking companies to pay for abortions. We're asking them to pay for insurance, or not even
Right.
necessarily pay for insurance, but to provide insurance.
But what I don't understand in terms of this argument is the issue is not providing insurance or coverage for things that you don't agree with. It's the fact that there's something is out there that is in the Christian worldview that doesn't fall in line with their thought. So why is the argument focused on, you know, why we hear more about this issue about the insurance than we are actually about the thing that they are against, which is the practice, you know, the form of abortions, the actual practice of abortions. How come that's not more front and center in this argument than withholding as much as withholding insurance from your workers because of a Christian belief?
So I just wanted to see if I can rephrase. So you're wondering why the issue of abortion isn't being. So for those who don't want to cover an insurance policy that can cover abortion as well, you're wondering why that abortion issue isn't being like the thing that they're like, no, and here's why, as opposed to just simply them being like, yeah, we don't want to cover this because contraception. Is that kind of like what you're saying?
That and why and why are they taking this line of action instead of actually working to fight, you know, pumping their money into working to fight against abortions and coming up with better ways and trying to find a solution to eradicate this practice? I mean, because that's what you do as an activist. You work on trying to get rid of the thing that is oppressive. And in the eyes of the Christian, the abortion, active abortion is death and oppression. And
So for now, so what you're saying is, why don't they just cover it for now, but start working towards trying to overcome that part of the requirement?
I just don't know why this is the narrative, why the insurance is the narrative and not the actual thing that they're fighting.
That's probably a pretty fair point. I think I've told you both before that when back in '04 and when Bush was running for a second term, the narrative became all about gay marriage, which I've called a colossal waste of time fighting that battle. Like, I've always felt like, now I think it probably got them votes, so Karl Rove's a genius, but but I feel like abortion has always been where it would have been a position that I don't feel would have been as much of a waste of time if the proper socioeconomic solutions had been pursued. And if if that topic was the issue, I wouldn't be as cynical about the culture wars that were getting fought during that time. But it's the same thing. Why isn't abortion put more front and center than it is? And I don't know why. It's probably a cynical attempt to still keep getting profits or something.
That's fair. That's a fair assessment. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
I heard a Christian speaker say one time that his name was Jason Upton, and he made the comment. He's like, for all the Christians in the world who want to get rid of abortion, he's like, do you think it'll be cheap? You get rid of abortion, and someone's economy somewhere is going to suffer. Like someone's bills are going to get paid. Like, it's not going to be like a cheap fight to like make any principled stand or to try to really end it. Because it'll require people to adopt and pay to help single mothers, and not to mention, just the jobs factor in it, everything about, because like Planned Parenthood is it? I don't know Planned Parenthood, but some of them are like for profit, and some abortion firms are for profit. So it's not. It's a money thing. Some of it's a money thing, no matter what.
Well, Planned Parenthood is a non-profit.
Okay, Planned Parenthood's a non-profit. Thank you.
Yeah.
But there are other for-profit places, and then of course you just have people who it's their like issue cause on the other side from me, and so that's their baby that they're pushing for. To the point where I think some of them sometimes forget that they're not trying to get as many abortions as they can, but they're trying to like eliminate the need for abortion to begin with. So, and then of course on the free market side, you have all these guys again who just don't want to pay for insurance and have the system overhauled.
Yeah. So I feel like a lot of that comes from that, because I'm always very cynical when there's a massive change in policy like this, and you see people rise up and get pissed about a policy change. I'm not always. I don't know.
We
feel like.
Go ahead.
Okay, I feel like it's not necessarily as much a theological perspective, at least from many employers, as it is a financial one. There's no doubt that providing insurance, probably.
Your mic on your computer is picking up their sound. It's not from your headset, Matt.
Hold on now.
Just let that noise go away, because we can't hear you, Ken.
Sorry.
Better or worse?
Nothing's changed.
Same.
Better or worse?
Same.
Okay. Wait, nope.
It's just everyone got quiet for a second.
Alright, that should do it.
All right, cool.
I don't know what to do.
It seems like the microphone on your computer is picking it up, not the microphone on your headset.
Ah,
Anyway, sorry.
Weird.
Go ahead.
And I feel like a lot of the times I have to be cynical and say, yeah, maybe this isn't this is more of a financial situation than a theological one. It has more to do with conservative financial policy. Because, yeah, providing healthcare is really expensive. But you know what? So is providing minimum wage. So is, and that's why a lot of companies go around it by getting cheap labor in China or Taiwan or, Myanmar.
And another aspect of this too is like, say if individuals or bosses, companies are able to um, choose what policy they cover, that also opens up the doors. Like if I worked for Hobby Lobby, for example, and because I don't have a Christian foundation in my beliefs, I could be released from my job because I don't support the bosses. Because it would open up those gates as well.
I'm not quite sure if that's true. As if someone who was, pro-choice would get fired for not walking like in lockstep with the Greens. I don't think that's true.
You don't think if I worked at Hobby Lobby and say I was pro-abortion, that if I worked in the realm where the CEO or whoever would find out, would not feel that I was not suitable employee for his company? If he already feels it's providing coverage for people to opt in or opt out is not good enough for their employees.
I think the biggest thing, his issue is he doesn't want to have to cover policies that offer abortive services. Like, I don't see that causing him to think a pro-choice worker is an unacceptable employee. I think at the end he would probably throw up the Greens would probably throw up their shoulders and go, I mean, dude, that's cool if you want to do that, if you want to think that, but we're not going to pay for it.
Yeah. Okay.
That was like once upon a time I had some friends who were renting from a Christian, and they were atheists, and they were like, we think if they find out, they're going to kick us out. And I was like, that's not going to happen.
Which, however, I'm just going to switch tracks for a second, did kind of happen recently. Were you following what happened to Professor Ryan Bell at Azusa Pacific?
Right, yeah.
Yes.
Azusa Pacific and Fuller Theological.
I had another debate on my Facebook about that with our favorite other. Oh crap! She'll be able to hear this. Dang it.
Yeah, it's when I first heard about this, for our listeners who aren't familiar, although I'm sure you are, it was actually quite big in sort of the sphere of people who would listen to this show anyway. Ryan J. Bell is a adjunct professor at Azusa Pacific and Fuller Theological Seminary. And he's a former pastor of a Seventh-day Adventist church, and he decided for a sort of experiment he was going to quote-unquote try on atheism for 1 year. And he came up with this whole thing. He wasn't going to go to church anymore. He was going to just read, sort of the secular, books. He was going to read everything from Hobbes to Spinoza to Nietzsche to Dennett to to Dawkins and Hitchens and Bertrand Russell, and he was going to try this on. He was going to read Voltaire and Dewey, and I heard about it and I was like, well, it's interesting. I don't think you could try on atheism any more than I could try on Catholicism and just like go to church every day, and that sort of like either belief or disbelief exists inside you.
Remind me that I have a comment.
I was saying kudos to him for wanting to explore that concept. But he was fired. like less than a week in, the school was like, no, you cannot do that, and they fired his ass.
So I ask you again, Matt. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, a couple things. Regarding the issue of trying on religion, there's a really cool book by a guy named Kevin Roos called The Unlikely Disciple. I really recommend it. He was a journalism student at Brown who went undercover at a Liberty for a semester, and it's funny because he like went to all the prayer groups. He went to all the don't masturbate groups. He went to all these different places. He sang in the choir, Thomas Road, and so he does all this stuff. He even had like a prayer partner or whatever he would pray with in the chapel. And then at the end of the semester, he's like, "Yeah, guys, I'm not a Christian." And they're like, "What?" And because they like he had never said he was or wasn't. They just assumed he was. And so he does all this stuff, and he walked away from it still appreciating some of the practices that he picked up, and he talked about the work ethic of the students and the practice of like prayer, meditation, those things. It's actually a really cool book. I would probably recommend getting it on Kindle. But that being said, I'm thinking in terms of religion, and this could just be because I took one anthropology class, and so I feel like an expert. But just talking about reading like Durkheim and the idea of religion as being more than private belief, but it's the rituals themselves. At least in part, like it's part ritual, it's part proposition, but I think it's possible to try on like the practices of religion, because they are rituals which shape human affection. And so you have like the Year of Living Biblically with that one guy. You have A Year of Biblical Womanhood by Rachel Held Evans. And so what this guy is doing is he's picking up on a gimmick that's kind of taken on its own like oeuvre of a year of flying spaghetti monster-ness. So you wear the ladle on your head or whatever for a year. And so this is kind of like an oeuvre that's developing. So I think he's in part jumping on that. So I think it's possible to at least see what happens when your life is shaped by these things as like a cool thought experiment. And in as much as this idea was a cool thought experiment, I was all for it. I had friends who were like, "No, it's stupid because he signed a faith statement." And you know what? They're absolutely right. When you sign a faith statement saying that you are a believing person for a faculty that's and for a school that's like, we're trying to propagate belief here. So like, if you're not a believing person, like, it doesn't make a lot of sense for you to work here. Kind of like if you're, a pastor who is an atheist, like, maybe there's another sect that's like the atheist Christian sect or something. But
yeah, they're called Episcopalians.
Yeah, exactly. Like, there's an Episcopalian church down the road, but here at Southern Baptist Church 507, we are not all for that. But in as much as it was a thought experiment, I was like, this is a brilliant idea because, like you said, Ken, he's not really an atheist if he's trying on atheism. He's just living his year like this, and it's a cool thought experiment. He's not actually not a Christian deep down, like he's still a Christian. And
and that was how I felt, is that, even though he signed a faith statement, like, I doubt that he actually lost his faith. He still, it's just he was trying to, and I assume it wasn't, he was trying it out so he could, maybe convert to being, losing his faith and becoming an atheist and getting outspoken. I think it was more, he was trying to understand the mindset of people who don't believe, the worldview and the how people cope in a world where they don't have faith in a higher being, which I can understand for someone who, especially someone who was a pastor and is a consultant and works in a theological seminary and a devout Christian school. It's probably almost unfathomable. But
here's my one pushback is that because I was totally with you, when I was defending him and going at it, and I had certain undisclosed Christians on my Facebook saying other things and being like, "Are you kidding me?" Then I read a Christianity Today article where he's quoted as, it might be more than a faith experiment for him. There's a comment on there where he's quoted as saying like, it's something like, you know what, I'm not sure what I am. And so I'm not sure if this also reflects a personal faith crisis on his part. I'm not sure if it's more at this. I've been given pause to think that it could be more than just a thought experiment. And the article's on my Facebook page, and it didn't seem like it was slanted like it was from Christianity Today, but it didn't seem to be like terribly slanted like this is a stupid idea. It was much more like, he's quoted as seeming to like that it could be more than just that. That being said, what's funny is that his bosses are quoted as saying like, yeah, this is really good groundbreaking work. This is very beneficial. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's funny because I read that too, where they kind of talk out of both sides of their mouth and like, oh, it's actually it's a very interesting thought experiment. It's very important. And they're like, but he can't work here anymore. It's like, wait, is it important and academically interesting, or should he not do it?
Exactly.
I don't know if you can have both of those.
Yeah, so that part I thought for them to say that after letting him go was silly. Again,
I feel like they were covering their asses and saying, because they also said, oh yeah, once he's done this year, if he wants to come back, he's more than welcome. But
yeah, because if he writes the next purpose-driven life in terms of like best-selling Christian books, then yeah, they're going to feel really
they're going to want him. Yeah, exactly. They're going to want him to be on their faculty. But I mean, to be fair, he was only an adjunct, so it's not like he lost out on too much money. Yeah,
and you know what? The one atheist. Did you read the article from the atheist who was talking about it? The friendly atheist.
Oh yes.
There's a site to raise money for him, and I think he's raised like $17,000 thus far.
Oh, good for him.
And I had a buddy who sent him like I think donated like $10 and was like, "Hey man, good luck."
Yeah.
And heck, $17,000 that probably covers his adjunct salary.
Yeah, no shit, right? Poor adjuncts.
I'm not going to say anything because I still want to get hired.
Well, hopefully you get more than an adjunct. Anyway, to continue on, I actually think we're almost out of time.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that we were supposed to cover? Hold on. Let me double check really quick.
The newsletter. Young people listen.
Oh, yes. The newsletter. Oh, christianpost.com. Oh, you make my life.
If you are a parent or a young pastor, I want to encourage you to screen this and then consider reading it to your teens and youth group.
Dude, that part. Yes.
So the title of this newsletter was "Are Our Youth Amusing Themselves to Hell?" Just when you thought the Satanic Panic was over and people didn't really care about satanic lyrics and music. No, that's not true. There's this guy.
I have to say I love the quote and the advisory. It says, due to the internet, the challenge of preserving innocent has gone out the windows for most adolescents today.
Yeah.
Damn you, internet.
Yeah. Welcome to the internet. So, I mean, this guy touches on everything from AC/DC's Highway to Hell from 1979. because that's what kids are listening to today. He talks about Britney Spears, Justin Bieber saying at 19, boasting on stage that he fucks bitches. Miley Cyrus, of course. Eminem. Lady Gaga, Nicki Minaj, R. Kelly. I do ask how relevant he thinks R. Kelly is. But it's an interesting read. I'll put a post in the. I'll put a link in the post for anyone who wants to read it, so they can.
What do you think about this? About his disclaimer at the bottom when he says, after breaking down all these artists and how they're sending our kids to hell. And he says, "For the record, I do not listen and will not listen to any of the above music. My careful research enables me to be a watchman on the wall, helping you as young people avoid the minefield that is before you." So what
Yeah,
do-
it's yeah. He it's one of those issues where someone doesn't really know what they're talking about, but they are damn sure that they know what they're talking about.
You know,
And you know what? I kind of get what he's saying. Yeah, like Nicki Minaj, probably not the most child-friendly pop star out there, but um, that's society today. Women can show more than their ankle without being deemed a harlot.
I just,
Uh,
I just want to know, and Matt, I want you to weigh in on this. He's against like Lady Gaga and stuff because quote because of shout outs to hookers and what did he say? Yeah, the shout outs to hookers. So this is what's driving children to hell. But didn't Jesus give shout outs to hookers?
uh, yeah, I guess.
He did give shout outs to hookers.
Shout out's a strong word.
I don't know.
I think
mean,
it says, I think it says shout outs in Acts 17.
yeah.
I as I was reading this, I actually wondered what you both would say. I think my initial thought was like, I'm not sure if Ken or Jason would disagree that pop culture, for the most part, is like trashy in general. Like, there's
Oh no. I am with you. Pop culture is bullshit.
like no one's arguing that it's like he makes this comment, and I want to talk about his comments about Rome falling in a little bit, but he does make this one comment that in the closing days of the Roman Empire, bizarreness masqueraded as creativity. And there's a truth to that. Like, in some ways, I was thinking like the Hunger Games and like the people in the Capitol, like people who have way too much time and energy and debt to be really constructive human beings because they're just caught up in the gossip of the Capitol and everything that's happening. Like, if we want to talk about the bizarreness of pop culture, yeah, it's pretty weird. Like,
yeah, well, it's a spectacle for spectacle's sake, and so for fear of getting old and boring, things get more and more risque, and I feel like that's how pop culture. I want to say evolves, but I don't think that's the right word.
develops.
Devolve would be more of a.
How does cancer spread? Spreads. Boom.
Spreads. Yes.
Infects.
Yes. Masticizes. That's it, right there. Yes. No, I agree that pop culture is just terrible. And I'm guilty of watching all the hip TV shows and fun movies that come out, but and kind of bobbing my head along when the new Justin Timberlake album comes on the radio at work, but I think he definitely goes a step overboard. The fall of Rome had very little to do with with those sort of eccentricities.
Ken, I'm so glad you brought that up because one of the things I wanted to do, I actually printed out an article. This is peer-reviewed Foreign Affairs, the March-April 2010 issue. And so it's called Empires on the Edge of Chaos. And so here we go. Here's why Rome fell. Perhaps the most famous story of imperial decline is that of ancient Rome. In the history of the decline and fall of the Roman Empire, published in 6 volumes between 1776 and 1788, Edward Gibbon covered more than 1,400 years of history from 180 to 1590. This was history over the very long run, in which the causes of decline range from personality disorders of individual emperors to the power of the Praetorian Guard and the rise of monotheism. That's an interesting one. After the death of Marcus Aurelius in 180, civil war became a recurring problem as aspiring emperors competed for the spoils of supreme power. By the 4th century, barbarian invasions or migrations were well underway and only intensified as the Huns moved west. Meanwhile, the challenge posed by Sassanid, I'm not Sassanid, Persia to the Eastern Roman Empire was steadily growing. There's some other stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Famine, epidemic disease, political
Yeah,
fascism, fiscal crisis, rebellion.
the fall of, I mean, to be fair, when you talk about the fall of the Roman Empire, most people, or fall of the Roman Empire, people think of 5th century, early 5th century, when the Western Empire kind of devolves and then just falls apart. But let's not forget that the Roman Empire stuck around until the 15th century.
Yeah. Is it 1490? Like 1492 or something? The Turks sacked it.
Yeah, it was right at the end of the 15th century. The Turks sacked it and set up the Ottoman Empire. But, I mean, Byzantia stuck around. The problem with the Roman Empire was everything from the fact that it was just way too big to be managed well. You know, the size of it was simply, it was unwieldy considering the modes of transportation and communication at the time. It was impossible to communicate from Rome to, you know, the outskirts of, pick a place. And that led to them setting up 2 capitals and, you know, trade. They came up with they kind of painted themselves into a corner, because by the time the early 5th century rolls around, Rome has no one to trade with but Rome. They're like, hey, we control everything around the Mediterranean, most of mainland Europe, parts of Asia, all of Asia Minor, and shit, there's no other like civilizations that we're in contact with that are advanced enough or wealthy enough for us to trade with. Because, hey, when Gaul had a lot of money, we conquered them. And so the Western Empire sort of fell apart. Like, they couldn't get resources quickly from the eastern part of the empire that was still trading heavily with the Far East through the Silk Road. And so they just sort of collapsed into individual fiefdoms and kingdoms and principalities and duchies. Especially when they were constantly being slaughtered by these wave after wave after wave after wave of barbarians that was coming in seeking land because they had been displaced by the eastern part of the empire.
Yeah.
So it really didn't have anything to do with giant orgies or although those posed their own problems, you know. I mean, inbred families led to sometimes crazy emperors. Monotheism, the rise of early Christianity. You saw the death of the Greek education system.
West Virginia.
West Virginia.
My mom's there. Screw you.
I mean, you know, in the 4th century, you see, you know, the death of the Greek system, and really that the pin in that is the slaughter of Hypatia of Alexandria. You know, I mean, when she was flayed and then burned by a Christian mob that didn't like her. Looking into why the planets seem to change direction in the sky and getting really close to a heliocentric model.
So close.
So close. We could have had that
so far
in the 4th century. But instead it got pushed back another 700 years. And so you have waves of issues that sort of led to the demise of the Western Roman Empire, and it wasn't just orgies. And
although don't get me wrong, like there is, you know, fiscal crisis did lead in part to its downward spiral.
Mismanagement of some elite emperors who thought that they had the grandeur of the early Julii family, you know, with Augustus and they thought they could spend like that, and they couldn't.
A lack of virtue will have its faults, and those could have empire-shattering consequences. It happens.
Yeah, and when everything else is crumbling around you, the last thing you need is a narcissist who's bad with money at the helm. So
Good thing Rome didn't have any of those until the end of their empire, right, fellas?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, because anyone who names themselves Augustus is a really, really humble dude.
Maybe not.
Yeah, I mean that's right up there with Antiochus IV, the Epiphanes, and look where it got him. Look where it got him.
Success. I mean,
not success. Absolutely not success. But so, I think that's everything that we can cover in an hour and some minutes. Now that I've ranted about the Roman Empire falling apart. It's not a good day until you rant about the Roman Empire falling apart.
Yeah.
But I'm glad you found some peer-reviewed stuff, because as I said in a thread on one of your statuses, peer reviewer, it didn't happen.
Yeah. Well, that's why I got it in part 2. I was like, I know that this probably isn't the reason why, like, it fell specifically, but I just want to investigate.
Yeah.
Just, see if I can find things that actually happened.
Yeah. No, I mean, craziness will lead to problems, but Rome had bigger, more pressing issues. Sort of the extravagancies are probably the final straw, so to speak. All right.
Yeah, it's weird that it is kind of weird when you fall after you've tried to convert everyone to Christianity and make it your official religion. Like, it's just weird.
True.
And then you apply that standard elsewhere, and it's like, oh.
No, not working.
Anyway,
so glad to be back. Glad Matt, you could come in, help fill in the role left open, so it's not just me talking for an hour. That would have been awful, and no one would have watched that.
Which reminds me, don't forget about the APB, Bob Price.
Yeah, Bob
Don't forget
Price.
about our APB, Bob Price.
If you find him and he's in Skyrim somewhere, let him know that we're worried, and he needs to come back to us. And if you have any tips and you need to get in touch with us, you can always call the Zombie Popcorn hotline, 757-337-2195. You can email us, nonreligious@zombiepopcorn.com. You can reach us through the Zombie Popcorn Facebook page, Google+, get at us on iTunes.
Wait. Hold off on the iTunes.
Nope.
I'm in the process of revamping the website, a whole new layout, everything. So the episodes I had to pull it off because off of iTunes and Stitcher and stuff for a while, because if there are not files, because I have to rebuild all the pages on the website. So I have to get the pages rebuilt, finalized before they'll start feeding back to iTunes and stuff, or they'll ban us for not using it. So right now, the only place that you can listen to the show is through Zombie Popcorn and on YouTube. So.
Well, go to the website or go to the YouTube page and check out the videos. Of course, all the other amazing shows as well. There's Coalesce with Matt and Jason here, and so tune in again. We'll try to start making this a regular event, especially once we find Mr. Price. And with that, we will see you next time.
Goodbye.
See ya.
Good job, guys.
He's got out there. I thought I was a good Christian. Jesus died on a cross.